with you, Alex.
Well, I'm just kind of wondering, how I know most people at this conference, we're all involved on some level in business continuity or emergency management, over at DEMCON. How do you see our role? What do you think, what do you expect of business continuity, from what you've seen and heard, or may have experienced in the past, from other places? What are your thoughts on it?
So when I look at business continuity, disaster management, all of that stuff, and this is speaking from an outside perspective, and this is
Yeah,
speaking from
and
someone,
that's exactly what I'm looking for, an
right?
outside perspective.
This is someone straight out of university. So for me, in my line of thinking, I always think you want to be proactive no matter how you can, right? And I always think back to this little comic strip I saw, and it was an IT professional, and they're dealing with a security hack, right? And it was when nothing was going on, everyone was like, why do we even pay you? Why do we keep you around? And then when something bad happens, they're like, why do we keep you around if you're not going to stop whatever's bad happening? So for me, in my line of thought, with COVID as an example, is that we should have been more prepared than we were. Remote working, everything else should have been systems in place. And it wasn't that business continuity professionals or disaster managers didn't have that. It was that people weren't respecting that line of work and respecting those processes. So from my perspective, it's kind of like business continuity at the end of the day is the group that's keeping everything running, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Greasing the wheels and making sure that, what few fires there are go out quickly, I kind of wish that people listened to you guys a little bit more,
Yeah. So we,
before COVID and everything else. And I sure after every disaster and during it, you guys are saying the same thing, like, oh, if only everyone had to listen to us just a little bit more,
Mhm.
and, you see that. And, I don't know, there's a time of reflection, I think. I think COVID has opened a lot of people's eyes into, continuity and resilience in healthcare, in, your business. There is not a business in the world that hasn't been affected over the last 6 months, drastically so.
Yeah.
I have one friend of mine who runs a startup. I don't know if he's a startup anymore. He's about 5 years into it. He has 70 employees, downtown office. And now he's like, you know, I can't have my employees in this office space. It's not safe. They have to work remotely. I now have to find solutions for 70 people who are remote working across the GTA. What does that look like? So I don't know if that kind of gives my thoughts on,
no,
my kind.
that's kind of
Yeah.
what I was looking for. How somebody not in the industry, and what their thoughts on the industry was. So no,
Right.
that you cover it.
Here's a question for you, if you don't mind me, Alex.
Yeah.
And that was, what do you think was the most surprising lesson learned over the last dealing with COVID? Do you think there was anything outside of the box that you weren't expecting? Was there something out of left field? What did you see?
For many organizations, and I'm going to speak from my own experience, that how quickly, from mine, it won't be for everybody, I'm sure, but from my experience, how quickly employees at the financial institution I was working at did adapt to working from home, because I don't want to say the pandemic came on quickly, because it didn't. We knew about it in December. We were hearing about it, and people started to talk about it, and started to think, okay, well, now we're starting to put in hand sanitizers, and some of these things were occurring, that people started to think maybe we should start consider working from home. So what surprised me is there wasn't a panic, and people just, from where I worked, really did adapt quickly to the change of working from home. Now, when that occurred, even though they made that change quickly, and then schools closed, then it kind of made a big change for everybody. All of a sudden they were sitting in a meeting. I got to go. My baby's crying. which actually happened in one meeting. So, you know, that was one of the parts that's been difficult to adapt to, and I wasn't surprised that even though that went smoothly, I think people in general were kind of really still not sure what COVID was, because it's still new. And things were changing so fast. When you thought you knew what it was, the report that would come out from a news station or a doctor later in the day, had new information to it. So I think there was a level of fear at the beginning, and people weren't quite sure what to think. And I think with this second wave, that's in some places already here, and people are now more aware, and I hope are a little bit better prepared. I know a couple of friends who are better prepared now. They know they've stocked up on certain things. We all saw that panic shopping with people buying 20 bags of toilet paper and things like that. But now I'm not seeing that. The shelves are full again. People are seem to be a little bit more aware of how to respond now to COVID. From what I'm seeing. And I know it's not that way everywhere. There's always things we'll see on the news that are extreme. So for me, I was surprised how fast people did adapt, and yet how much fear was still around, and now how people are still adapting, and things are changing, like this conference, and how they're now, instead of response mode, to all their fear, they're now preparing for, or are prepared for, a longer term. From some of the things I've been reading and seeing. I know I am. If things lock down, well, I've got water here now. I've got toilet paper. I've got my go bag. In case there's a situation where I have to leave. First aid kits and all that kind of thing. Everything is ready. I'm better prepared, and I know some other people who are now too. But weren't before. So those are some of the key things. And there's so many other things, and COVID has changed us in so many ways. This conference being for one. How we're doing it. So, what about you?
It's
Go ahead.
well, for us, it was very similar. We actually made the decision to let everyone work from home and close the office about 2 weeks before Ontario went into lockdown. So we were really quick. We're in the event industry, and we kind of thought, let everyone stay at home, be safe. Now, back then, we only thought that lockdown would last, 2 weeks, maybe a month, stuff like that. Obviously, that wasn't the case. But our concern in the short term back then was, will our staff be comfortable with this? And will they be okay with it? Will they be productive, at the core? And what we found is that everyone was productive. Everyone was perfectly comfortable. There were certain people, however, that didn't like working from home. They like working in an office environment. And I totally agree with them. I think there should be a total separation from where you work and where you live. And unfortunately for a lot of people, that space has now been blended.
Yeah.
So for us, this is what we've seen. And it comes into the topic of what becomes the new normal. And I kind of dislike the statement of new normal, because when I hear a lot of people say it, they say it in a time span of like 6 months, like the new normal for 6 months. For me, what a new normal is, it's how you're going to be conducting business forever, or until the next big event. And for us, I know before COVID, we had discussions of, do we go to a 4-day work week?
Yeah.
Times are changing. Do you really have to be in the office? Can you be just as productive? Maybe it's 4 days in the office, 1 day at home. Now it's kind of like, well, do you take more risks? Do you play around a little bit? Do you say, look, is there an opportunity where you're in the office 1 day a week, right? And the rest of it, you're working from home on your own hours, and that's one change I can kind of see becoming more and more prevalent, is offices saying, hey, we're going to a 3-day work week because you're just as productive on the 3 days. We can retain talent a lot more. It'll be really, really cool.
Yeah.
Um,
I, I,
there's
go ahead.
there is a rash of changes coming. and a rash of changes that people aren't fully prepared for. Businesses are not prepared for. You know, I'll give you an example. My one buddy who's hiring for a job, trying to find an engineer, put out a job posting. In the job posting, it said, "I will pay you a downtown Toronto salary, but I will hire you from anywhere in the world. Doesn't matter if you're 12-hour difference. Doesn't matter if you're 30 minutes away from the office." And I think that's one thing that a lot of people haven't realized yet is that as remote working becomes more ingrained with larger companies and even smaller companies, the geographical area that people can spread their wings in will infinitesimally rise. It's a good it's a good and bad thing for individuals. It's good in that you can take an opportunity halfway around the world and be fine. It's also a bad thing though because you're also now in that same competition bracket with everyone else.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that hasn't been fully realized yet and will be realized as we move into 2021. And it's going to be interesting to see how not only individuals respond to it, but corporations as well.
It's interesting you said that because on Monday I received a phone call from a recruiter, and I was talking to them, and I said, the one thing that COVID has done is allowing people looking for opportunities to look beyond their local areas now because they've got capabilities to work from home, and organizations now can look for staff beyond their local city. If it's just for Vancouver, then you're only looking for someone in Vancouver. But with working from home capabilities and the different technology that's out there, they can now look at potential people applying from Halifax on the other side of the country,
Right.
which they wouldn't have done before.
It will be a really exciting time, really exciting to watch. I think I think as COVID was going on at its peak moment, I had this terrible thought in the back of my mind that this may be not the death knell, but certainly a blow to globalization, the movement of people, the trading of ideas. But I'm realizing that perhaps that's not necessarily the case. There is an opportunity to spread these ideas. There is an opportunity to be a global citizen. And I think through things like this, you're going to be able to see it. And I think
Yeah.
you'll also see people's standard of living in the long term greatly increase. You don't have to live in Toronto. You don't have to fight traffic. You don't have to spend an hour a day each way commuting. You can have more time at home, more time with your family, doing what you love,
Hmm.
and doing something hopefully really exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. And you brought it up earlier too that sometimes there are challenges with that. The work life balance. Having the home office and the office. Has now become the same place. So sometimes there is a bit of an issue and trouble distinguishing between when you're really on work and when you're off work.
Right.
That's a challenge for some people right now.
Yeah, and you know what? I think it's one thing that unfortunately a lot of people have been forced into, but I think it's something too that will have to be untangled at some point. People will realize they don't want to work at home every single day of the week. Not because it's not easier for them or it's not convenient, because a lot of people don't want to get up in the morning, walk down to their office, and think, wow, I've got all this work today at home. 5 o'clock hits, and you're like, oh, I might as well stay in the office a little longer, right?
Yeah.
I think, and it went back before COVID. Before COVID, I didn't think you should eat at your desk because you need a separation of where you eat, enjoy yourself, and where you work. So I think these are conversations governments and corporations are really going to have. I think people are already beginning to have these conversations of, I can't wait to get back in the office, or I can't wait to put the kids back in school,
Hmm.
stuff like that. So it's going to be an interesting little while, and there's going to be some knocks and some bruises, but I think there's really golden opportunities that can be found there.
Yeah, I think so too. There will be some changes, and there will be some sort of a hybrid approach. As you kind of outlined, a couple of days in the office, but and then a couple of days at home. Are staggering, one day on, one day in, one day out, type thing in the office, because people really do still need that interaction, and water cooler talk, so to speak. You still need that. I wish I could still talk to some of the people I was working with, but instead it's through things like this. But it's not the same as being able to share a joke or something like that, with someone sitting beside you. You know.
Right. And I think we'll all have to go on our own pace, both as a corporation and as people, and we'll find it eventually. You know,
Yeah.
there's all the struggles everyone's going through.
Yeah, and some people will adapt. Some people will, want to be in the office every day. Some may want to stay at home, and some will do, go back and forth. And that includes, leaders as well. Management. They're no different than anybody else. And as you say, going to be a different pace for some people. Some people are going to be ready to, chomp at the bit. I think someone said yesterday, to get back, while others, no, more cautious and want to stay back, and it's going to take time for everybody to adapt.
Yeah. And you're already seeing, I think, some of the ramifications. You look at, I wouldn't necessarily call it a flight, but I would call it a certain level of cooling to markets like Toronto, right? Big city markets. And you're seeing a boom in the suburbs and places outside of that. And I think what it is people just want more space.
Hmm.
They want, they realize they can work remotely. They want some space to grow, stretch their arms, stretch their legs, get an actual backyard or whatever it is. Um, so I wonder if there's also a shift in priorities we're seeing right now of people saying if virtual is staying around, I'd much rather live in a more open environment and be further away from work and have the 1 day commute a week or whatever it is
Hmm.
versus being downtown,
Yeah.
is what I see. I've got one good friend of mine who lives in London, UK, and his corporation pulled him aside. They said, look, you're going to be in the office 1 day a month. 1 day a month. Doesn't matter where in the world you live, doesn't matter where you go, you know. But you think of the challenges too that means, because now they're saying you can go live in the US if you want.
Yeah.
Okay, well now you have to have a team meeting. You got one guy in the US, one guy in the UK, you got two people in Singapore. What does that look like? So,
Yeah. It opens you up to a whole new challenges to address.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. I know I wouldn't be upset if I was told, you have to be in the office 2 days a week, and three, you're going to work from home. Great. Wonderful. I live in Guelph. I have to drive to Milton to catch the GO train. And then, and that's from where I live in Guelph to Milton is an hour, and then an hour train ride in. So, it's 4 hours of commute a day. Well, it used to be 4 hours commute a day for me, and I would nap and read and write and do different things. But still, having those 4 hours back to me, oh yes, I would love that. You know,
It's hard to abandon that, right?
yeah, yeah. You know, um, I know, whenever I start working again, full time, instead of part time stuff, contracts and things, I really hope I have the option to be able to do that. And I think maybe other people are too, is asking those questions. Well, what options do I have now? Am I 5 days at the office? Can I work from home? Is there that ability to work from home? How long do I have to wait until I can work from home? What's the split? You know, so I think people are asking that questions, because millennials have been asking those kind of questions for a while now. But
Yeah.
now everybody is.
Well, there's not a lot you can't do at home that you could do in an office, right? There's with the internet now, with laptops, there's no reason why you can't have a meeting like this, remotely or on the road or whatever, And I think for millennials too, it's going to be less of a perk and more of a requirement.
Yes, yeah, I think so too. It's interesting. You can the last office I worked at, you always knew who, even without looking at someone, you knew who the millennial was because there were stand-up desks in different spots. And you go, "That's a millennial. That's a millennial."
Right.
And it always turned out it was true. And it's not a stereotype. It just happened to be the way it was in this office. You know.
I think you're going to see that too. So I'm part of Generation Z, I think it is, so right below millennial. And I think what you're going to see is you're also going to see, in environments like schooling, you're going to see a desire, at least in post high school levels, at the very least, a desire for greater remote learning opportunities. And I don't think a ton of people are super, super happy when a university says, we're going to do virtual classes, but we're still going to charge you $50,000 a year.
Mhm.
Um, they want flexible opportunities. They want flexible hours. They want what they want. And I think it goes for schooling, it goes for corporations, it goes for government. I think if you're still going to conduct the business the same way you did 12 months ago, I think it'll be to your detriment
Yes.
18 months from then.
Yeah, I think so too. There's things are changing, and you either you embrace change or you get left behind as a result of change. You
Right.
know, so I think learnings, universities, on any level, and corporations. You don't need to bring everybody in the same room. I know you mentioned having meetings like this, and I had team meetings where one day everybody, not everyone likes their camera on, but one day everyone agreed they would have their camera on and everyone had to dress, fancy, everyone with suit and tie or, whatever the case may be, you know, just so that everyone could, have a fun time seeing each other, look a little bit different, and then there was a day everyone wore a silly hat when we had a meeting, and everyone could see, what silly hat we were having. So there are still ways of having this remote capability and having people work from home, yet still having fun with it.
Right. So what we did when the pandemic first started, and we were worried to a degree, not necessarily worried, but there's always that thought in the back of your mind, and that's how is everyone dealing with this? You know, do they need someone to talk to? Do they just need some interaction? Because back then it wasn't, I'm going to go visit my mother's house or whatever. That wasn't a thing. So one of our coworkers came up with the idea of every Friday night you'd have a quiz night, and
Mm.
it was you end the office early, but for about an hour and a half, everyone went on there and we just did quizzes for an hour and a half. It was a lot of fun. And a lot of people came out of their shells. It was a
Mm.
really good opportunity to get people to separate their work week from the weekend and
Yeah.
to get them talking to people, which back then people didn't really have the opportunity to do. So
Mhm.
I think stuff like that's important. I think it's really important just to keep, and you've said it throughout your session and yesterday, mental health is really important. You have to keep those lines of communication open whenever possible. And if you haven't talked to someone in a while, it doesn't hurt to phone them and
Yeah.
just say, hey, I know you've been working on this project. Tell me about it. What do you think?
Yeah.
Right? Stuff like that. And that's what I've seen in our corporation, how that's developed and how things are changing, and probably how things will continue to be.
Yeah. And it's interesting, reaching out. You mentioned that I was working on a project, and there was a person there. I was originally born in England, so sometimes I say words a little bit weird, and have to repeat myself just because the way my accent was. And on this project, there was a gentleman who had an English accent, and I was wanted. He was way up there in the hierarchy type thing. So someone in the position I was taking at that time, you're not supposed to really talk, approach all these high level people. But one day, because of these meetings, I sent him a side note, and because he said a word, and I said, "Wow, I haven't heard that word, since I was a little kid in England." And we just got to know each other that way, and then we actually talked for 15 minutes after the meeting, getting to know, and I found out where he was from, and we both have family in the same area. That for all we knew may know each other. It was rather interesting. Even though this COVID has kind of pushed everyone apart by staying at home, it also helped bring a couple of people together.
Yeah.
You know,
I think one thing that COVID did was it broke routine. Humans are
Mhm.
creatures of routine,
Yeah,
and we don't like it when something breaks that routine. And what
yeah,
I think happened to a lot of people was they got reset, and they're like, okay, I gotta find a new routine. I gotta talk to new people. I gotta, I don't know if experiment is the right word, but I gotta put myself more out there
Yeah.
and build those connections. And Alex, if you don't mind me asking, where in England are you from originally?
Uh, I was born in Farnham, Surrey.
In
Uh,
Surrey?
yeah, Surrey, southwest
I,
of.
I went to school in Surrey.
Where in Surrey?
So
Where?
it's not. I went to school in Egham,
Egham. Okay. Yeah.
so right by Surrey. It's was a school called Royal Holloway, part of the University of London. So I spent 3 years out there.
Oh, nice. Well, I was born in Farnham.
Okay, so right by there. Small
Yeah.
world.
Yeah. Not far. See, technology can
Yeah.
bring people closer together too. If you like that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.